to Preservation Connecticut Spring 2022 series talking about preservation, our noontime chats about everything preservation. I'm Jane Montanaro, Executive Director of Preservation Connecticut, and I'm pleased to be your host today. Today we're chatting about undertaking a passive house retrofit with Karin Patriquin of Patriquin Architects. But before I hand the controls over to Karin, let me give you a brief intro into Preservation Connecticut. Preservation Connecticut is the statewide private nonprofit historic preservation organization founded in 1975 by a special act of the Connecticut General Assembly as the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation to preserve, protect, and promote the buildings, sites, and landscapes that contribute to the heritage and vitality of Connecticut's communities. We are statutory partners with the State Historic Preservation Office, and I'm proud to say that for over 4 decades, we have successfully championed the protection of remarkable community assets all over the state by leveraging funding, advocating, forming partnerships, and promoting stewardship. Our office is on Whitney Avenue in Hamden, Connecticut, and it's listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Shown here, it's the Eli Whitney boarding house, built in 1827 to house workers for Eli Whitney's factory, and it served as Preservation Connecticut's headquarters since 1989. We have a staff of 9 preservation professionals and a board of 21 preservationists from around the state. Staff listed here are always available to assist with inquiries. Christopher Wiegren, our Deputy Director. Contact Chris for information on historic preservation easements, our bi-monthly magazine, Connecticut Preservation News, our Olmsted in Connecticut Landscape Survey, or to arrange book talks for his recently published book, Connecticut Architecture, Stories of 100 Places. Renee Tribert, Making Places and Preservation Services Manager. Please contact Renee for information on redevelopment of historic industrial sites and tax credit applications. Jordan Sorensen is our Development and Special Projects Manager. Jordan manages our communications and outreach to members through social media and email, receives and monitors demolition notices from municipalities, and prepares historic tax credit applications and nominations to the State and National Register of Historic Places. Kristen Hopewood is our Development Assistant, and she manages all of the inquiries that come through our website, provides member services, arranges special events, and is the editor of our Historic Properties Exchange, a free listing of threatened historic properties. And finally, our team of circuit riders, Brad Scheid, Mike Farino, Stacy Vero, and Stefan Danchuk. They provide immediate boots on the ground service to homeowners, developers, municipal leaders, nonprofit organizations, museums, historic district commissions, and more, with an array of preservation technical assistance, including community organizing, prioritizing maintenance and repairs, historic designations, funding, and archaeology. These chats have served as a meaningful way for us to continue our mission during the pandemic. We've been able to connect with the public and hear what's on your mind. Please feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions or ask questions directly at the end of the presentation. And of course, feel free to contact us afterwards for a follow-up call or a site visit. Many thanks to our sponsor, Neil Hawk Architects, for generously underwriting our 2022 Connecticut Preservation Awards ceremony and for supporting the Talking About Preservation programming. And this is our last installment of the spring series. So please let us know what you'd like to hear for our fall series. We'll be taking inquiries and setting up scheduling soon. So with that, we can finally get to Karin. We're so excited to have you here with us today, Karin.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for hosting this really interesting series. And we will dig right in. So my name again is Karin Patriquin with Patriquin Architects. We bought a building in 2018. That is what we call affectionately the King's Block. So let me share my screen. There we go. And I'm sorry, get this going. a second. There we go. Good, so everyone can see my screen. This is what's known as the King's Block. It was actually, the property was bought in 1811 by Herman Hotchkiss. There was a building here, a house, moved it so that he could build a hotel. And that's what we think it was about 1816. In 1850, Richard King bought this building and added wooden buildings to the sides of them to create a sort of multi-commercial block. And from that moment on, it was called King's Block. We know that at one point there was a coffee house that was called the Fairhaven Coffee House on the first floor. More about that later. But we are very excited to have undertaken a passive house retrofit, and I'll get into what that actually means. But first I want to start with a little bit of background on the building. So this is the location. We are on the corner of Grand Avenue and Front Street in Fairhaven. This is the Grand Avenue Bridge, the turning bridge that was recently renovated, finally opened this spring. And from this point to the east is Fairhaven Heights, and this is Fairhaven. This is the extent of the property as it currently stands. So a building with our building and a lawn in the back. And then we have shared parking with the neighbor next door. So here's some Sanborn maps that really speak to what this was in the 19th century. The earliest Sanborn that we were able to find is 1886. You see top left. You can see that the building here in pink signifies masonry in these Sanborn maps, and yellow is wood. That what's now our current masonry building is here in the top right. And there were these buildings that were added to the side of it and to the back of it by King. So you can see also the addresses, interestingly. So this, our building was between 14 and 20. So 1, 2, 3, 4 addresses for our building alone, and then it went all the way up to 42. And to this day, there are some records that call this 14, some call it 20, some call it 14 to 20. Grand Avenue. The next one here, you can see, oops, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. The next top left, top right, you can see there was a slight change here, not too much of a change, but by 1924, the bulk of the buildings that were attached to the masonry were taken down. We don't know why particularly, but then certainly by 1973, then there were still one building off to the side, nothing off to the bottom except a fire escape stair, and this little building here was on the property somewhere. Yeah. So Sanborns are always interesting to look at to get an idea of the history, and it really reflects you can see the history. Basically, we really see the history on the building. These are photos probably from the 70s, 80s, and in 1983 there was a major renovation that was taken to create this, to really renovate what was starting to be a really dilapidated building. It was actually slated for demolition when the city was undertaking a major renovation, another previous renovation of the bridge. They were going to widen the street, so they were going to actually demolish this building. Some concerned citizens came, put their pennies together, and bought the building. So you can see here the front, what we call the front of the building on Grand Avenue, and this was sort of remnants of those buildings on the west side that were attached. You can see there were doors that went into those other buildings. So this facade was very sort of mangled. You can just see over here on the south side the fire escape that was there at the time. So this is how the building looked when we started our renovation. So a major renovation had already happened in the 80s. It was still a commercial building when we came in first as renters and then bought the building from Carol Cheney. So this is where we were. This is where we were before our renovation. Again, this is Grand Avenue. This is Front Street. So these are very, you can see organized, very sort of 4 bays here, and then, you know, organized, very symmetrical. And on the back, it's a mishmash. And on the side, during that renovation, they did order some of these windows. So these are not necessarily original. But this was very important to us and to the historic district to know this history, because any changes that we wanted to make to the building, we wanted to make sure were on a part of the building that was already, had been changed over time. So it was less sort of pristine historic fabric. So here in this is from our application to HDC for our renovation. Our renovation is really mostly an interior renovation, and that was very specific. We really want to bring this up to a passive house standard, but did not want to touch certainly the windows. We looked at pricing windows that were going to look exactly as these ones did, extremely expensive and also not nearly as energy efficient as the ones that we finally went with. So we decided to do everything on the interior. We re-insulated on the interior, recreated an air barrier on the interior, and added windows to the interior. Here's our front street facade, and here all we're doing is we're adding, we're changing some signage, and again we make a note here that we're adding windows to the interior. And here on the back again is then what our argument for where to put any of the sort of penetrations that we need for our new mechanical systems. Idea again here being that this was already something that was not necessarily supposed to be a very visible part of the building when it was first built and over the years, so that we allowed ourselves to put small penetrations here for, and then we painted them the same color as the yellow here, for those intake and exhaust of our new mechanical systems, and then some signage and some new exterior lighting. On this side, very little change, just a new light. And again, we just make a note about these windows being changed over. We also changed the front windows to triple pane windows. So here, this tells two stories. One is what this, with the volumes of our building. So on the first floor, what used to be the hotel lobby and dining room will eventually be a cafe. We're actually very excited. We haven't actually put our approvals for that yet, but we're very excited to recreate a building that will be more public. Second floor is our studio, and third floor is our conference room, but originally that would have been, the second floor would have been the rooms, and the third floor would have been a ballroom. So you can see the second part of the story of this drawing tells you is that what we're doing here is the line of the red here is the line of our air barrier. So we're creating this air barrier that would prevent transfer of heat, especially to the exterior. And then we have new mechanical systems that bring in fresh air and filters that fresh air and creates a very, very energy efficient system. You can also see that we are disconnecting the basement thermally and from an air barrier perspective as well. And that was for many reasons. One is that the air in our building used to be really, really mold filled. No matter where you were, you all smelled, even though, on the upper floors, there was no mold itself, but the building, the air was being, was coming in from the basement. So one thing in making a better air quality was to bring the mechanicals to each floor. Another reason for that is that we are right by the river. River is back here. You can see the river from our windows. We are just above 100-year floodplain, but there is, there is moisture, and we are also in the 500-year floodplain. So we didn't want to put any of our mechanicals or any essential pieces in the basement. So it is does have a dehumidifier now, and has will be storage. We can use it for that, but we don't want to use it for essential functions. So what is passive house? What is our passive house retrofit? Really, it is an improved envelope. So creating an air barrier that's very tight, creating a much improved insulation value, much over building code, improved interior windows, and then new mechanical systems that are separate for each floor. So we now have three, 1, 2, 3 mechanical systems where there used to be 3 gigantic gas furnaces in the basement. So the intent for this passive house retrofit is to respond to climate change through greatly improved energy efficiency. Again, to create fewer energy loads, to decrease the loads, we are making sure that the air here is very controlled. We also calculated all our interior loads, our plug loads, and then eventually we'll also be adding some solar panels, photovoltaics, that will offset 80% of our energy. We're also improving the interior conditions and occupant health. We also know from an office standpoint, there's been a lot of studies that there are fewer sick days, much improved productivity with better air. And this is really a big part of a renovation as well. And then resiliency. We want to extend the building's lifespan and preserve a key part of New Haven architectural history. In looking at this, certain elements were close to their end of life, for instance, the roof. So we also undertook a change of roof, even though we hadn't really looked at it at first, but the fact that it was near end of life and the fact that we wanted to put solar panels sort of warranted a new roof as well. So the overall renovation, including the passive house and some of these other elements, really will now create a building that is going to require much less maintenance in the next, certainly, hopefully 50 years at least. So elements that we did need to change, any openings to a part of the building that's open to the elements need to be highly insulated. We do have a custom, this is not the customized version, there is a custom version of this door and surround that we still have to finalize, it's not yet in. Triple pane windows, we did do these, we've replaced these double pane windows with triple pane windows. We're adding some signage, and we changed some of the lights. These are just elements that we were going through with the Historic District Commission. And then these are these louvers that are in the south wall that provide for intake and exhaust of air. And then here is our new window. So these are the existing windows on the exterior. This is the existing brick wall. We are adding insulation to the interior of that. There was some insulation there before, but we took that all out and started from scratch. Added a layer of what's called a stow gold here, which is the first barrier for bulk water, and then dense packed cellulose, then our air barrier. And anytime this air barrier is moving sort of into different planes, it had to be very, very carefully taped and looked at with neighboring materials to make sure that was a continuous air barrier. Outside of our air barrier, we have another 2x3 of furring that allows for any of the electrical to go into, and so that you're never piercing that air barrier, and it also has additional insulation in that as well. So here, just some more details of the wall sections. At the roof level, we found too that we added some structure for structural reasons, but also for just to give us some more depth and a straight plane, so we could actually sheetrock it again because it was very wavy. So we added some structure in all the to the existing joists, so that we could have more insulation there. I do have a cheat sheet on how much insulation we have where. So on our, I think there was maybe a question about that later, but in the walls we have an R34, for instance. In the roof we have an R62, and our basement ceiling, which is basically the equivalent of our floor, is an R37.5. So here is what is currently our first floor. We have not finished the first floor yet. We're waiting for our new tenant. But this shows you the double wall and the double window. So those are the existing windows that are still there. And in fact, for moisture and to prevent condensation, we actually keep those a little bit open so the air can just do what it needs to do. It's actually usually being used almost as a screen now. And this is really what is keeping the elements out, these new triple pane windows. So it's in a closed position. This is the open for if you want to clean or open that window. And then this is a ventilation mode where it just stays open like this if you want to bring in fresh air. We know that windows are very, very important to preservation for the look and feel from the exterior. This is the, on the left, photo of the windows before, and on the right is a photo of the windows afterwards, which are almost invisible because, again, it's the new window is on the interior. And just a close-up of that. On the left-hand side, these two photos here are of the window, of a window that was not changed. So the windows to our stairwells were not insulated. We didn't need to insulate that area. So that's what those look like. And then on the right, there's one in an area that was insulated. So again, that same window that existed there before, but you can see just on the oblique view that you do see the other window, you know, in back here. So there's you know, very slight difference if you compare that to that, for instance. We don't think it's something that makes a huge just a huge difference historically, and it's certainly for us, we think that, you know, the benefits of having a building that's extremely resilient really outweighs any sort of aesthetic change here. These are our new mechanical systems, one on each floor, very small. This is a 6-foot door that you can see there. And probably, so that box itself is probably 18 by 40 maybe. And then here's some photos of the construction. So these are the 3 floors, top floor, middle floor, and bottom floor at different moments in time. So on the left is when we exposed the structure, took off some of the plaster and sheetrock, which is at a time when we found a number of structural elements that we had to fix. Including a chimney that was leaning precariously over a sidewalk, so we had to stop construction and fix that. Here is that chimney that was starting to disconnect from the wall. We ended up taking it off and creating a new box up in the you know, above the roof to mimic the previous chimney. So there's, you know, a number of elements that were exposed that needed to be fixed. Next is where we sprayed with this Stowe Gold, it's called, to prevent that first layer of bulk water to enter the building. Then on the 3rd floor, you can see we added those joists again to add some depth so we can get some more insulation in here. And then this is what you see here is the air barrier where we have the dense packed cellulose blown in behind it. And then you can see the furring for where the sheetrock is going to go up, and then an extra layer of insulation there. Here you see a window detail from when we put the air barrier. We just cut it here, and then it was wrapped in and folded so that it became part of that sort of continuous air barrier when we added the 2nd window. And this is what it looks like today on the 2nd and 3rd floors. So I'm sitting in the 3rd floor. You can see that there. But here was what was used to be the hotel ballroom. And then 2nd floor, we were able to expose the ceiling joists, which really helps with the feeling of height because those are fairly low ceilings. So it really helps to have that extra height. And then we just exposed the mechanical. So this is the extent of the mechanical ducting that you need in this space. Similar down here. Here we actually made it as a more pancake shape, an oval shape as opposed to a round. And then we just painted it white to make it disappear a little bit into the white of the ceiling. A few things that are yet to come. Our front door assembly we need to finalize. We know we need to do some signage, and then two more big steps for us: the photovoltaics, which we just received approval for with the HDC, and a cafe restaurant that will be added on the ground floor. So these are some drawings from the HDC application that will be on this on the southwest side, and here's a rendering of the front, starting to activate that storefront space to allow for public use. This is our concept now for a cafe, and we'll have to work with the cafe to understand what their needs are and what our goals are for our building in a passive house building, because for instance, we do not want a large exhaust that would just negate everything that we've done. So different types of cooking. So certainly no electric, no fossil fuels, no gas, all electric. Probably induction, no deep fryers, those kind of things. So it will be a discussion on how the menu will be set, how they are cooking, and that's really something that they were actually very, very interested in as well. So that'll be an interesting talk. We know that the Hotel Marcel just opened up, and they have a passive house renovation as well, and their restaurant is fully functioning as all electric. So some lessons learned there as well, I'm sure. And then here's a rendering of what we're hoping, will be a more active storefront than has been in the last 20, 30 years. In fact, when I started renting on the first floor, those front windows, these really large windows, were always just shaded. The shades were down, so it just feels like a very cold front, because you don't know what's going on inside. So we're really excited to activate that. And that's it. So I was hoping that we would have enough time for any questions and discussion. And I think we do have that time.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Karin.
You're very welcome.
I think there are a lot of questions. I don't know if anyone wanted to start the conversation off, or I can go to some of the questions that were submitted before the program. So I know this was in your presentation in the sections, the details, but how were the walls and roof insulated with what materials? Maybe a review.
Sure, absolutely. Let's see. So overall, the majority of insulation, so the R value, is to the exterior of our air vapor barrier that we talked about. So dense packed cellulose provides the majority of our R value in the walls, roof, and basement. So each of those then were separately dealt with. The walls have about 7 inches of blown in dense packed cellulose. So between the existing brick wall and the new air barrier, and then 2.5 inches of fiberglass batt. We were actually hoping to do mineral wool at the time, but it wasn't available. We just could not find it we looked for at least a month. So anyway, we went to fiberglass batt for some of those. The roof has 3.5 inches of closed cell spray foam immediately below the existing roof deck. And this was based on a lot of back and forth with FIAS, the Passive House Institute of US, about how to isolate the dense packed cellulose from the existing roof decking. We were trying not to put as foam or use as little of it as possible. That was really one of the areas that did need it. We also put it in some areas right by the sidewalk, for instance, knowing that it does have a good moisture barrier in it as well. And then, sorry, I didn't finish that part. 3.5 inches of closed cell spray foam, and then 9.5 of blown in dense packed cellulose. That's in the roof. And then in the basement ceiling, we have 8.5 blown in dense packed cellulose, and again, the 2.5 fiberglass batt. So yeah, each one is slightly different. Each number is slightly different, but yeah. And then overall, I think I gave you the R values before.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. How is the air barrier made continuous between floors?
That was actually one of the toughest parts. So we know we have 3 floors, right? 1, 2, and 3. Between 1 and 2, and then between 2 and 3 was not nearly as difficult as going between the first floor and the basement. So what we did is we cut into, we left the joists, we cut back the floor, and then brought it up that way, sort of between the joists. But then at the joist, you had to wrap over onto the joist and create a lot of tape, because we found that the air was actually traveling along small cracks in each of those joists. So that was probably the most painstaking part, was doing a proper air barrier between the basement and the first floor. Very good question.
Have you mentioned how much the project costs?
You know what? I don't have a tally, and I'm embarrassed to say that. We do not have a tally. I do need to put that together.
And then, so like, do you have an idea of what the payback period, what you expect on some of your investments?
Yeah, so that's interesting because there's a couple of different things. One is the we did an energy model, and we did payback for just the roof panels by themselves, right? So the roof panels by themselves, just because that always goes, that's actually calculated very specifically with UI or whoever your electric utility is. And in our case, it came to somewhere between 7 and 11 years, depending on who you're talking to. We had 2 or 3 different manufacturers looking at that with us. So for that was about 7, and then one of them said that we have a 30-year savings based on 4% of inflation of about $147,000 over 30 years. So payback for that alone was probably 7 to 11. And then overall, the thing is that it's a little tough to calculate because there are certain elements that, because they were at their end of their life, the roof, for instance, it really depends where you are in that cycle, but that's something that we undertook. And the main part was that we knew that we wanted to do a renovation of some sort. So it's a little, yeah, but it is something that we do want to track. And we already we will have, utility tracking for, the electric and then the solar with it, and we do want to track that over a period of time.
Is this the first project like this in a historic building that you've done for a passive house?
First historic passive house, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, we're looking at a couple of new construction projects, but the first passive house. So it was a good learning studio for us.
Yeah. Well, it looked like it worked out very cleanly and efficiently.
It was definitely a longer construction period than hoped for. Many factors, but with historic, you just never know what you're going to uncover. And so we did uncover some either unusual situations that need to be dealt with differently from what we planned, or dangerous situations, like the chimney that need to be taken down. And then, yes, there were supply issues, and then there were, there's also just a learning curve from both ourselves and our contractor. So, but we're very, very happy to be here now, and we look forward to welcoming our clients as well.
Well, it's definitely a case study that we'll be pointing to when people are asking us about how historic and passive house can work together. This is fantastic.
Yeah. I know that there are some places, there are very few places that have done this interior window, but and I think we need some more data on those projects very, very specifically, because if it works really well, it's such a great way of being able to keep a window and providing the most energy efficient window behind it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Karin, that was going to be my question. This is Stacy. Hi. The double window is just fascinating to me. And can you talk a little bit more about how that functions and how you make sure that condensation doesn't happen and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So when we looked at it, I went to a couple of conferences. One that was in Boston, and in the Boston area, they have, for some reason in that area, they've done a lot more experimentation on either double windows or just historic renovation typologies with windows in general. And when I visited, there were a few people that had done it, but not at a passive house level. So there are examples that I could point to, and I had learned from a couple of contractors. In other cities, in Montreal, for instance, where I'm from, double windows are very common. So that what here you would just call the storm window, is just much more beefy and also insulative. So the thing that you do though is that on the outside window, you make the inside window, you make sure that is operable, and then the outside window, when you see condensation, you actually just open it up a little thing that has holes in it, so that you have some air movement between the two windows. It's the fact that you're trapping air in between that creates the condensation. So if you need to, and then in our case here in our building, we're actually just keeping all the windows open an inch or so. And so far, you know, we've just moved in the last couple months, or we've been monitoring for about 3-4 months. But so far, that has done the trick. There was a time when, oh yeah, someone had come in and had closed all the windows because there was a rainstorm coming in. And then the funny thing was that no, we had to say, no, we have to keep it open a little bit. So there was condensation on some of the windows. We opened them up again, just like an inch or two, and then everything was fine. There's also, you know, there's a number of places like the Building Science Corporation in Boston that we checked in with to see what their experience was with this, and they approved the strategy based on the fact that there was extremely, you know, a triple pane window, and it was connected to the air barrier, and then the outside window really creates just sort of a screening type thing, and yes, keeping that open. So we did some research and checked in with a few organizations. Also the fact that we're working with FIAS and that we're getting certification, you have then access to their staff that reviews everything.
Mm-hmm. That's great, thank you.
And there's a question in the chat. Was the interior face of the brick sealed or unsealed before the cellulose was sprayed?
The interior face of the brick was sealed with this product called Stow Gold, yes, before putting in the dense packed cellulose. Yeah, yes. And it's called, I'm trying to see what it's called here. Yeah, so it's called Stow Gold. Yeah, and it's the first, it's a vapor barrier.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll open it up to the floor if anyone else had questions. I think we got everything in the chat.
Okay, I mean, we certainly have any other sort of technical product information too that we could certainly circulate if anyone was interested. You know, the air barriers were very sort of, some of them were directional. So you know, we can get into all those kind of details, but we have, if anyone did want to follow up, we can certainly answer any of those kind of questions.
Great.
I actually have a question.
Yes,
Karin, can you talk about the process for bringing all this before the Historic District Commission? Sure.
Yeah. Well, we have presented many times before HEC, so we know the issues and the intent, right? So we wanted to make sure that what we were proposing already was what they would approve of. And there is a process with the City of New Haven, with our historic district, that we have an informal review with their staff as well before an actual hearing. So in our case, we put an application together, and we're touching on all the elements that are visible from the exterior. So we know that they have purview on any of the facades that are visible. In our case, we have a 4-sided building. So not 4-sided. It's visible from all 4 sides. So we had to make sure that we had a good reason and a good location for any of the elements that were going to be seen as, you know, obtrusive, which is in our case the exhaust. So really, that was the one that we had to talk about the most, just because we knew we were going to have to remove some of the brick there, and we just knew that in our case that facade had already been disrupted so many times over the history that was not necessarily virgin fabric. So we prepared an application that just showed all the elements that would be affected, but really all the preparation was before. Really for us was just how we were going to approach this building, because it's historic, and because it's historic, we want to do all the renovation on the interior, so that you're not affecting the exterior facade. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's helpful.
Yeah, and in our case, because we were ongoing, we found some other issues, or we wanted to change things. We actually did end up going 2 more times. So one, when we found that the chimney was disconnecting from the interior wall, we wanted to take it down. Our structural engineer just said, you have to take it down. We said, well, we can't just take down a chimney. So we, had the engineer write a letter about it. We took photos, and then we presented a scheme that showed a brick veneer that was very close to the existing. We actually took photos of those samples beside the existing. That was one other time. And then when we decided to put photovoltaics on, we also did the same kind of thing where we showed an image of what that would look like with specifications for all the products that we were to use. Yeah, so key that anytime there's something that is visible, that is on the exterior, to put them all together into a package for an application for a certificate of appropriateness.
Great, thank you. Vasek, I thought you had your hand up.
I did. I did. My question was, I'm curious, it was hard to tell from your drawings. How thick did your walls end up being?
How thick are they? That's a good question. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I think they are now 9 in total, but I think we were close to that anyway. I think we added 2 inches in total because we ended up sort of reworking what was already existing.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me just see if I can find that. Yeah, it's a little hard to tell. Oh darn, I thought we had. Sorry. Yeah, basically we've added this extra portion right here, this 2x3.
So,
yeah. So we added probably added 3 inches to what it was before.
okay. No, I was just envisioning these massively large sills that would be wonderful for plants and the like, but
yeah, so you can see on this drawing here, this is what it was before, and this probably ended right around here, and then so we added this. But because we want to have our new window in line with the structure, we don't actually end up with big sills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Karin, we had in the chat from your firm 20-inch exterior face of brick to interior face of the drywall.
Oh, including the brick. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. Thank you.
And will you be able to share the slide deck with us? We have some folks
absolutely.
who'd be interested in referring to it. And we'll send out an email too to everyone with some of the resources that you mentioned also attached to it. From Richard, was there surviving historic trim?
There was, I don't know if there was any historic trim to speak of. There was a big renovation in the 80s where there was, so all that interior had been taken down at that time. I don't know at what point the building went from hotel to office, but when I came in, it already was office. In fact, it was then office and residential. So it's had a lot of different renovations over time. In fact, there's a list of all the different retail and business uses that it's had over the years. It has always been, at least a portion of it has always been commercial and office. There's been a lot of changes. There were apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor sometime in the 1900s. So there was a lot of change, and there was no sort of trim to speak of. With it, we did remove the. There was a sort of shallow barrel vault behind me here in the ballroom. What was the ballroom floor? And we've actually kept one of those so that if we wanted to, we could recreate that, or at least put one of those sort of ribs back if we wanted to. That was actually the saddest part, but the one part that we were actually hoping to keep, and we're just not able to do that, was to keep that barrel vault.
And Karin, did you use any historic tax credits on this project?
We did not, and the reason being, I think triple windows are not something that they're used to, and an initial conversation was that they were not really open to that. So when we looked at triple glazed, even the triple glazed, 6/6 lights. They just weren't nearly as efficient. So for us, the best compromise was to do what we, the way that we did it.
Yeah.
We know that Hotel Marcel does have triple pane windows, so obviously different.
Yeah, they're doing the tax credits. Yep.
Tax credits, yeah, different era. But it is hard with windows that are double hung and that are multi-paned. Yeah. Like the reality is that there's extremely expensive. I mean, 3 times the price, and that windows, are good size, a good portion of this renovation, the window cost.
Terrific.
And we were able to keep them, right? So I think it's one of those
Yes.
things, and we were able to keep the actual original ones. So, it's yeah.
Found a solution that works for everyone.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Karin. I really appreciate you taking time to share this project with us. Very exciting.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, everyone at Preservation Connecticut. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And this video will be posted on our YouTube channel as well. Thank you.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Karin. Bye.